Hey everyone, welcome to Sunny Commutes, a podcast where I combine the worlds of web development and business and share my experiences. This is podcast episode 64, where I'll be talking about why you should ditch jQuery. Now, if you're unfamiliar with what jQuery is, then you're probably not using it, and so it's kind of a weird episode to be listening to, but regardless, I'm going to be explaining why it was good at the time of when it was popular, when it was created, the problem I see with still using jQuery today, and the alternatives that you have for when you decide not to use jQuery anymore. So first, what was it good for? So when jQuery was first created, and when it was the most popular, it was great for writing cross-browser JavaScript code and just for getting things done. So the thing to understand is that at the time of when jQuery was really popular, the browsers kind of handled things drastically different, which is still a problem today, but it's definitely not at the same scale. Now we have a lot of modern browsers with pretty standard and consistent APIs, but back then, browsers were really much more different, especially Internet Explorer. So when you had to support like IE6, IE7, IE8, and so on, you had to, if you were not using jQuery, you had to write code essentially at least two different times. One would be for the modern browsers, which even then you might do things differently, between Firefox and Safari. But then you had to write code like a second or third time just to get it to work in IE. And this was a really big problem, of course, because now you're not just focusing on building apps and building cool things. Instead, you're focusing on making your code work across different browsers. So jQuery kind of hopped in and was like, okay, let's just create a single consistent API where you would call things, a single way. You would select DOM elements a single way. You would do AJAX requests a single way. And it would guarantee that it would work across pretty much all of the browsers. And this is really cool. Obviously, you could just focus on just building your app this way. And jQuery included a lot of things built in. So you had DOM manipulation, AJAX, animations, utilities, all of that stuff was already included in jQuery. So at the time, like writing cross-browser code that allowed you to do all those different things was really awesome, right? Now, the problem that we have today is that browsers have gotten better. Browsers have built-in, standard, pretty consistent APIs across all of the different modern browsers that we use today. And features have been added as well. So a lot of the things that jQuery had where you were like, oh, cool, this is a great way to select DOM elements. Well, now you can do the same thing and just by using the native browser API. So including jQuery and using it today is essentially just adding bloat to your website. It's an unneeded dependency, essentially, and I really think that we should stop using it. A lot of big websites like GitHub have stopped using it for this reason. So how do you now just go about removing jQuery? Or if you were to build a new project, how would you no longer use jQuery on that project? So let's just kind of go down the different categories real quick. First thing that jQuery has is DOM manipulation. And this is pretty simple. Just use document.querySelector and document.querySelector all. The API is pretty much the same as jQuery's. You just don't use the $sign. You just use query selector. And you can just pass the CSS selector to select DOM elements. It's built in, works, in pretty much all of the modern browsers, including IE. And not much else to say. It just works great. The second thing is AJAX. So if you're doing AJAX requests, there's a new API that makes this much easier, and it's also available across browser. Although for IE, you might have to use a polyfill, but that's still better than nothing. And it's called Fetch. So you might have heard about it already, but the Fetch API is pretty nice to work with. Now if you want to do something a little bit more powerful, if you need certain features, you can pull in an Ajax specific library, something like Axios. And, now you might be thinking like, well, I'm removing a library, but including another one in. But something like Axios is doing just one thing, which is Ajax requests. And I see that being better as including a library or framework like jQuery that's doing like multiple different things, right? So I recommend using either native APIs or including a much smaller library that it just has a single purpose. So then if you want to like swap it out for something else, or you decide to use the native APIs, it's much easier to do that. The third thing is animations. Now CSS has gotten better in browsers as well, and they added animation features, so just use those. Just use CSS for your animations, and they're more performant as well. Finally, there's some utilities that jQuery has, like if you want to like loop over an array, or like or like for merging objects. That was another one it had. For a lot of those things, you can either use one, just native JavaScript features that are available in like ES6 and above, or two, use a library that includes a bunch of useful utilities. It's called Lodash, and you just pull in again the one specific utility function that you need, and boom, you're done. You have pretty much broken out all of the things that jQuery has provided, and you're just pulling in specific libraries now instead, or just using what's available in the browser. So you don't have to use the libraries. You can just pretty much do everything that jQuery did for you and just use the browser APIs that are provided for you. So that's pretty much it for jQuery. Like I said, a lot of big websites are removing it, and there's really like little to no reason to continue using it, outside of course, if you already have a big project that would be really hard to migrate jQuery from. But I definitely recommend check out these alternatives, and for any new website that you build, just use those alternatives and see how potentially easy and potentially better your code might be to maintain, and for in terms of performance as well, how much faster your site might load without including in a framework that isn't really doing much for you anymore. All right, that's it. Thank you for listening. I hope you are able to now ditch jQuery, having been given the reasons why and the alternatives that you could use. You can tweet me feedback at sunnysyncIO, and you can find all of the previous episodes on the website, sunnycommutes.fm. You can subscribe in your favorite podcast app, and I'll catch you on the next episode. Peace.